Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Hot Pierre summer is over. We're now on to the fall of Pierre. Evan, ever since you ran into him at the arena, it has just been an endless topsy-turvy ride, and unfortunately, our memes have become dreams. It's over.
He didn't miss for like 4 months, and then that was it.
What a news cycle that has all unraveled in like the last 15 minutes, it seems like. I'm reading these Michael Andlauer quotes right now, and I'm like, can we slow down and spread this out over a few episodes by chance?
It's a lot. It is scorched earth.
Yeah. And some of the reports coming out about potential new GMs to replace Dorion. Oh, this is our dream. This is every content creator's dream today.
I like when other teams potentially make missteps before they even happen, so we can like kind of bathe in their misery.
Yeah, it's a nice step away from your own history of misery. You get out of your own reality for a little bit. And I'm not even just talking about the Red Wings. Like, you know, you dented the rear bumper on your car or you had a bad day at work. Just enjoy what's happening to the Ottawa Senators right now. I have a few Sens fan friends, and I did message them saying, this is a bit much from the hockey gods. I actually do feel for you.
It's been a terrible, basically 7 days for Sens fans.
Yeah. This is the worst day of your life so far.
So far, yeah.
Anyhow, the Red Wings did some cool stuff, and we actually have a lot of good Red Wings content today. It's just funny how the NHL sometimes is like, hey, the stuff after your Red Wings conversations to start the show, it's going to be pretty meaty. So thank you, NHL, and apologies to our Sens fan friends, although I guess with the rivalry now, not. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, which is a big statement, and more. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking about Detroit's electric late-game win over Ilya Sorokin and the New York Islanders, which was very fun and very surprising, as well as the storylines to take away from that game and a look forward to their next 2 games before our next episode. We'll also be talking about some news actually for Boston, which is relevant to the Red Wings, and we'll be checking in with Prashanth Iyer, part of the Winged Wheel Podcast, content family, hosts of Expected by Whom, where we take a look at the Red Wings by the numbers so far this season to get a little bit of insight and analysis on what the underlying numbers compared to the eye test say about these Detroit Red Wings. We'll then get into some NHL news, which, I mean, some is an understatement. Ottawa is going to be forfeiting a first-round pick. The rumors ended up being true. Pierre Dorion has been relieved of his duties as general manager of the Ottawa Senators, and Michael Andlauer did not hold back in his press conference as a brand new owner in the NHL. Some news about Nick Backstrom out of Washington and more before overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know this is your last chance. This Saturday is Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA, Saturday, November 4th against the Boston Bruins. You've heard me do this spiel enough. Why don't we let Ken Daniels take it over to tell you about Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA?
Hey, Red Wing fans, the fabulous Winged Wheel Podcast Night at Little Caesars Arena is coming up this Saturday against the Boston Bruins. And with tickets, you get into the game, of course, as well as access to the fabulous pregame live recording of the Winged Wheel Podcast featuring Chris Osgood and me. Plus, a special edition co-branded Detroit Red Wings Winged Wheel Podcast beanie. Tickets are discounted. And the great part, the portion of the proceeds benefit the Jamie Daniels Foundation. Now, very few tickets remain, so this is your last chance to grab them. Go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings or go to the link in the Winged Wheel Podcast bio on Twitter or Instagram. Hope to see you there.
Thank you to Ken for recording that. Additionally, the Winged Wheel Podcast is supported almost entirely by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to join the Dub Club, you get access to benefits like our Winged Wheel Podcast exclusive Discord. You're automatically entered into all of our giveaways that we do. For example, this season and last season, actually, we're giving away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, something that we're proud to continue. The vast majority of those going to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want access to all of that, as well as our bonus content, which posts right after these main shows, our bonus overtime episodes. So all of that and lots more, it helps us to do everything that we do. Let's talk about Detroit's win over the New York Islanders. This game, to me, I mean, a Red Wings Islanders game, you look at the amount of offensive talent on those teams, you look at the play style of those teams. I feel like the joke the last 10 times that they've played is, oh boy, what a barn burner. And I think I texted one of you, almost at the end of the second period saying, oh boy, what a barn burner. Like, it was just one of those games where someone couldn't break through. And I thought after the Islanders scored at the end of the second period, shorthanded goal, kind of a killer for the Red Wings. Ilya Sorokin's one of the best goalies in the league. This is trending to be like the Winnipeg game, but somehow feeling worse. And then Detroit breaks through for 4 goals on Ilya Sorokin to win dramatically in overtime. What a result. What an important win. A gutsy win for the Red Wings.
We said it last episode, and this was the inverse of it. When a game's going horribly, boring, dull, whatever you want to call it, and the Red Wings aren't generating much, although I feel like they had a lot more chances in the first 2 periods against the Islanders than they did Boston. They just got Sorokined. But they weren't generating a ton. And then they go down 1-0 in the third, then they go 2-0 down early in the third. Wings games of years past, most of us could have comfortably turned off the TV at that point. Like the Boston game, we said, hey, there's a chance. It didn't happen, but we'll stick around because there's a chance. Same thing with the Islanders. Hey, there's a chance. And it actually came to fruition. They actually did complete the comeback. And again, against a very defensively stingy team like the Islanders with arguably the best goalie in the world behind them. So it's not a small feat to shovel 4 goals in basically a period worth of time.
The fact that this took place right after we had the conversation of, Detroit really hangs in there for games and it's allowing them to an opportunity, even if it's not ideal for them to only step into a game in the third period, it's allowing them to jump in the third period. As you're alluding to, Brad, you could almost predict how 60 minutes would have gone for Detroit before. But now we've seen multiple examples of this. And after last episode, the first game after, it was yet another example, and it was a prime one, where Detroit was resilient. They hung in there, and the odds were stacked against them because of how good Sorokin is. Like, yes, they're defensively stingy, the Islanders, but, Sorokin is a game-breaker level talented goalie, and it looked like he was Sorokining the Red Wings. And the fact that they turned it around, that's going to be... You can't rely on that game after game, I'll say that. Like, this isn't going to make Detroit a 115-point team this season. You can't be doing that game after game. You need to find ways to play 60 minutes, and that's my criticism of Detroit of late, is you need to find a way to break through earlier. Even if, they played better against Winnipeg and the Islanders than they did against Boston, the results still need to be there before the third. But if you can salvage points in these games, even if it was just one, that makes a difference. Daniel Sprong scored a goal that was the inverse of his first 2 goals, which is, 1, he actually took a shot, and 2, he actually, showed why he's a talented goal scorer. That was, to me, a goal scorer's goal. You drag the puck inside around a defender, even if they get the stick on it or the puck bobbles a little bit, he still finds a way to fire the shot. You get the goalie moving, especially such a sound goalie like Sorokin. You start to create your own space and you fire it home with great execution. Brad, you know more about stick angles and shot efficiency than I do. That was, to me, the hallmark of why Daniel Sprong was brought in.
Yeah, it was great to see, not only from a skill standpoint, but getting back to one of the points we made a couple minutes ago where they were getting Sorokin for the first 2 periods. There was a moment in the second period where Klim Kostin made a really good play to spring Daniel Sprong on a 2-on-1, no pun intended. And he went to go high glove on Sorokin, and Sorokin made a very difficult save look unbelievably easy, which was the point where I was saying, yeah, this might be all she wrote for the night. Nothing's getting past Sorokin. And then he comes down, the next period, executes that difficult play, changes the angle on Sorokin, and just rips it. And with the angle he was skating and the way the puck was, accuracy is kind of a hope and a prayer on that one. So you, for the most part, just firing it to an area. Mm-hmm. And I think that one got under Sorokin's arm, but you can only play the hand you're dealt, and he executed it perfectly, which most players would not have been able to do.
Jake Walman, not even 2 minutes later, fired one home off of a scrambling offensive zone pressure situation, and that just happened to get through. It wasn't the best goal of his career, but it got through. That one was from Seider and Raymond.
Well, that was the goal that the Red Wings were missing in the first 2 periods. They got a lot of shots and a lot of good chances, but there wasn't enough going on in front of Sorokin on a lot of those chances, and there wasn't a lot of second chances. So finally, setting it up. Be like, all right, he's an amazing goalie. Might help if he can't see the puck.
Yeah. Screen him. Create traffic. That's the kind of thing that makes a difference when the goalie's going to just stop everything otherwise. Seider and Raymond assisted Jake Walman's goal, and then JT Compher scored one of the easiest goals of his career off of an unreal look from Mo Seider at the point. We've seen Mo Seider do this before. He'll look off a defender. He'll let his body drift a little bit. He won't tell people with his eyes or his body that he sees a guy wide open to the right of the goalie, which is what he saw in JT Compher. Fired a perfect pass down low. That is exceptionally hard to do. Seider made that look easy. I just want you to know, playing from the blue line, like, that is an exceptionally hard seam to find, a pass to execute. And much like a quarterback doesn't want to give away his reads and why some quarterbacks get picked off more than others, defensemen from the blue line, you don't want to give away your reads like that. Any player on the ice, really. And Seider is masterful at being able to execute with very little tells that he's going to do it. Awesome look at JT Compher, who scored the goal to go ahead. 7:55 in the third was Daniel Sprong's goal, and JT Compher's third goal to take the lead was at 11:43 in the third. So that's how quick that sequence happened. And it's so funny. We talked about this last episode. Mo Seider, we've talked a lot about, expectations are sky high for him. He wants to step into that elite status of the upper echelon of NHL defensemen, and so you hold him to task on getting better. And by those standards, he's not having his best season. And even at not his best season, he's making plays like that and contributing offensively.
He's a point per game, isn't he, right now?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's an off year for Mo Seider so far.
You'll absolutely take it. Now, they're leading 3-2, and by no means did you think it was a given that they were going to win the game, but the Perron penalty late in the game was a killer to me. Like, it was just such an avoidable penalty, and then you knew the moment that penalty was taken.
Yeah, someone actually posted that in our group chat like 5 seconds before the puck went in, like, oh, they're absolutely scoring on this power play, and then
they did. And that's the kind of thing that I think the Red Wings need to work on. Like, they're good enough now where their minor penalties are going to make a difference in their game. And I don't think they've been the most disciplined team. There have been a lot of kind of boneheaded penalties, even if not boneheaded, inopportune, where, you worked hard for these goals. They're stingy games. You don't have some games. I mean, I know the Red Wings have been scoring a ton, but there are going to be a lot of games where they're going to have to work hard for 3 goals, and you just can't be putting yourself on the penalty kill that often. That's something I'd like to see the Red Wings rein in a little bit.
Be fine if they took a good penalty in their own zone, if they're hemmed in or it's negating a scoring chance, but it was just a lazy play from Perron on the defensive side of the puck in the neutral zone, and you cannot be taking a stick penalty.
No.
In that position at that time of the game. It's just, you don't expect the guy who's played as many games as Perron has in the NHL to take a penalty like that, but we've seen a couple infractions from him this year that have kind of make you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, there's no like discounting what Perron has done for this team, and we've sung his praises. Last year he was such a force for Detroit, but he's had a weird start to the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not been the Perron that we knew last year.
No, despite how good the Red Wings offense has been, there's definitely been a few underachievers there, and I would put him in that category.
In any case, didn't matter. Overtime, which was a blast, obviously because of the result, but Lucas Raymond came through. Puck was turned over. Raymond stripped the puck or got the turnover, went down, made a nice pass to Compher that you thought was going to be shot. Compher was smart to hold it because Sorokin was in position, or he saw that Raymond was able to get behind the defenseman that was playing between the two of them. Great pass back, automatic goal for Lucas Raymond. Red Wings win, and Lucas Raymond's facial reactions this year as he scores goals have been hysterical. But that guy is just so excited to be winning hockey games, like just genuinely 45 out of 10 amped. Happy for him. He's been doing the right things every game, and I know the production was like for the first few games, people were like, oh, it's a little bit lagging behind DeBrincat and Larkin, but he's starting to catch up now, and the points are coming, the results are coming, and that was a huge, huge goal for Raymond to score in terms of the Red Wings as a team.
Well, if the Red Wings want to get a wild card spot this year, the Islanders are a team they need to take points away from.
Yep.
There are going to be a lot of teams in that battle, and every point's important. But these are the 3 and 4 point games where you can really take a huge swing at the teams competing with you for those same spots.
It was an important win because, one, Detroit was on a 3-game losing skid. After, losing the opener, but then winning, 5 games in a row. the Seattle one was a tough loss, but you still squeaked out a point. But Winnipeg and Boston, those didn't feel good, and that brought it to 3 L's in a row. And, losing to Seattle and Winnipeg at home and then traveling to Boston and Long Island, a lot of people would have said, yep, those are not schedule losses, but those are going to be tough wins to get. And, the Boston game didn't do anything to inspire confidence. And through 40 minutes, Detroit was not in a position where you thought, yeah, they're going to walk away with 2 points here. So for them to be, like we said at the top of the segment, as gutsy as they were and able to break through with such a substantial task, which was Ilya Sorokin as a world-class goalie ahead of him, that's the kind of thing, you're right, Brad. Those kind of points not only matter in terms of the standings, and yeah, you want to collect as many as you can. That's the difference between a hockey team who can genuinely compete and make noise in the playoff race.
That third period was a 3-point swing in the standings. The Islanders could look like they were going to collect an easy 2. They only walk away with 1, and then Detroit takes 2. It's not insignificant when that happens throughout. I don't care if it's October, November, February, it doesn't matter. Those are big swings in the standings.
Well, they've got another one coming up in Florida, too, who are only 4 points back. And another team who, they're in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. And I know they're now also without Oliver Ekman-Larsson, which we'll probably talk about. But they're a team who think they belong in the playoffs, too. So this upcoming game is just as big as the Islander game.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like the Florida game is a really good, I think, litmus test on how the Red Wings can handle things over the course of a season. That is a divisional rival, you're right. And I mean, it's too early to say who's going to be in a divisional seed and who's going to be in the wild card race, but a lot of people would peg Florida as a potential wild card team. So if Detroit wants to unseat someone, they need to be, 1, performing against their own division, and 2, performing against teams who are going to be in that wild card spot. So, they're back home now, so automatically DeBrincat's going to score, that. Can they have a full 60 minutes? Are they going to be able to, relight up the power play, build on some momentum rather than kind of let things turn back against them? You mentioned Ekman-Larsson, Evan, and that's relevant for Saturday's game against Boston, Winged Wheel Podcast Night. People might be looking at the previous Saturday Boston game in Boston and thinking, oh boy, that's Detroit, going against a tough foe again. Yeah, they're at home, but they did not look like the better team. Well, Boston's going to be without Charlie McAvoy, who laid a brutal hit.
It was like drive-by headshot.
That was nasty. I don't know a lot about, I don't want to say I was surprised to see that from Charlie McAvoy. You don't watch a guy 82 games a year, but at the same, I'm surprised to see that from any player of his caliber. That was just dumb.
And it's not like he was targeting another star player or something like that. No offense to Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but I think his better days are behind him. The wires clearly crossed because he had OEL in his sights for 4 or 5 seconds, which is in the NHL a lifetime. And he just contact right to the head.
And speaking of NHL lifetimes, 4 games for a hit to the head is 17 times as long as the average NHL suspension for a hit to the head. And to a star player, you see them all the time reduce the amount of time a star player misses. So I thought the suspension was appropriate, first of all.
For headshots, I always want it to be more severe, but I'm not going to complain on this one. They are getting very close to actually understanding the relevance and the impact of it. So
yeah,
and it's the second one in a week. Who was it? Rasmus Anderson from Calgary got suspended the same amount of games for the same thing.
Yeah.
And he had to miss the Heritage Classic because of it too. So the NHL really isn't screwing around on these, which is finally good to see.
So 2 important games. Florida, as Evan mentioned, is going to be wanting to win against Detroit. They have 2 games in hand against Detroit as of right now, and they're 4 points back. So, if they win this one, then they think, okay, we can leapfrog Detroit in the standings. Detroit in the second divisional seed at this time of recording on Wednesday evening. And then the Boston game, obviously, Boston's the team to beat right now, not just in the Atlantic, but across the NHL. Vegas is the only other team who's really kind of, rivaled what they've done to start the season. So 2 important tests, but we're getting into the point now where the Red Wings are good enough, or the expectation that they're good enough, where every game is an important test. It's not like years past where you can pick out 5-6 games every few months and say, okay, these are the key ones where the results really matter. No, all of them matter now. We're almost becoming a broken record.
I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what this team is all about. We know they've got some upcoming stars. We know they've got some wily veterans. And it's trying to figure out where they stack up with the teams in their division and the other potential playoff teams. And I think that's why these games are more important right now, because I don't want to say the jury's out on this team and what's possible, but everybody seemed to have this team 7th in the division across the hockey media world. So I think a lot of people are still curious as to what this team truly is.
Yeah, and, removing Red Wings colored lenses here, there have been a lot of teams in the past in the NHL who have started this hot and settled back down into where they are. Like, would you predict that the Montreal Canadiens are going to keep a 5-2-2 pace over the course of the season?
Well, I picked Cole Caulfield in our fantasy league, so yes, I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you've changed. You're fully on the Montreal has just skipped the rebuild. Yeah. Oh my goodness, a worldly man. Anyhow, that is the Red Wings past game, their upcoming games. Let's talk more Red Wings, but let's do it with Prashanth Iyer, host of Expected by Whom, good friend of the Winged Wheel podcast and our resident analytics expert. A great conversation with Prashanth. Enjoy. Prashanth, this is the first time since the season started that we had you on the Winged Wheel podcast. You've been so busy with Expected by Whom and playing your life as Carmen Sandiego that we haven't had you on WWP since the Red Wings dropped the puck.
Yeah, honestly, we were just talking about that before the show. I think this is the longest I've gone between guest appearances, which is probably why your ratings have gone up.
I don't think that's true, and you were actually doling out some seriously interesting facts as we were just prepping interview notes here. And I told you, I was like, hey, save this for your show. Save this for Expected by Whom. I don't know why you're giving us all the good content. This is absolutely the dumpster for hockey conversation. The good stuff lives on your show.
Well, I mean, now that I'm coming on the number 2 or 3 podcasts in North America for hockey, I gotta up my game and actually have decent facts. I can't just be making stuff up here now.
Well, at least someone's not doing it. Folks, welcome back to the show. Prashanth Iyer, host of Expected by Whom and great friend of the Winged Wheel podcast, part of the Winged Wheel podcast family here. Prashanth, I know it's been busy for you, but it's been some start to the season. How's everything been, watching the Red Wings start the season and for you and your family at home?
Well, I'll start with the Red Wings. I think this has been the most fun 10 games we've had to start a season in quite some time. Obviously we've had bright moments in early parts of the season. I think back to the Anthony Mantha 4-goal game that he was able to pull off. And he's always, all of his hot starts were always great to watch, and that kind of generated a lot of excitement. But I can't say that I've ever had this much excitement watching the team probably in the last, 10 years, 9 years. Through the first 10 games, it's exciting, it's electric, the offense is fun, getting some timely saves from Ville Husso. So Red Wings are a lot of fun, and then that just makes family life at home that much more fun. Now that I've got a 2-year-old running around, and he has his own mini sticks net now, and so he thinks it's absolutely hilarious to just fire the ball at me, which is probably par for the course for what most folks would do if they were in the same room as me.
Yeah, and he would be correct. That is actually very funny. So I'll let you guide the conversation here, because there's so many different paths I want to go down based on the numbers I know you've pulled on the Red Wings. I guess this is like a ad hoc Red Wings by the numbers segment, but I know you have some key stats that you think would be interesting to talk about. So fire away. What's standing out for you the most right now with the Red Wings?
Well, I think you first have to just start with the Red Wings record. They're 6-3-1. And, obviously there's been a couple of disappointing losses in there. The loss against Winnipeg, you would have hoped they would have been able to pull out a point. The loss against Boston where they sort of got outplayed and outclassed for the majority of the game. There's definitely some disappointment there. But if you just sort of step back and look at the 6-3-1 record, that's the most points the Wings have pulled in the first 10 games of a season going back to the last time they made the playoffs, which was 2014-2015 when they opened 6-2-2. They've had 6 wins, before in 2016-2017, but the 13 points that they pulled is actually the most that they have pulled since pulling 14 back in 2014-2015. This is also the most the offense has ever scored. In the first 10 games, again, going back to the last time they were in the playoffs, it's the best goal differential the Wings have had at +9. This is the best the power play's ever been. The penalty kills over 80%, and the 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage is just under 49% per evolving hockey, which is, again, one of the better marks the Wings have been able to put up going back to the last time they were in the playoffs. So you have to be excited about not only the results that the Wings are getting, but the way that they're getting those results and the depth scoring that's been able to contribute. It doesn't appear to be as much of a, mirage or kind of false hope as it maybe has been in previous years when the Wings have been able to go, 5-3-2 last year or 4-4-2 the year before. This one feels like it has a little bit more weight behind it.
So, preseason folks between, the Winged Wheel podcast, you, Max, anyone else, the predictions for the Red Wings point range was anywhere from, I think, like 82, and I still think I was the most optimistic one with 91. None of those are, decidedly playoff point totals. And I'm going to ask you a question that's going to make your statistician hair fall out. Through 10 games, have you seen enough where you would, if you were allowed to, edit your prediction, go back in time, where you would increase that into potentially the playoff range or even at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I had them at 87 points, if I'm remembering my preseason prediction right. I may revise it after 10 games up to 89 or 90, I think. I don't know that I've seen enough. Rather, let me take a step back here. As a statistician, thinker in the way that I like to approach this, I don't think I can revise it any more than that. It's 10 games. We've played 12% of the season. There's 88% of the season to go. There's a lot of hockey left to be played. That being said, the Wings have been more impressive than I was anticipating, without a doubt, particularly the movement on the power play, a power play that I was not expecting to be this crisp, given that the coach didn't really change and you've only, inserted Gostisbehere and DeBrincat, two very, very talented players, but I thought it would certainly take some time for that to get clicking. That hasn't been the case at all. So, I might revise it up 3-ish points to about 90, but I don't know that you can do all that much more at this point, given that you still have a power play that's operating at what would be an NHL record rate. We know that's not going to be sustainable. And you've still got 5-on-5 play that has room to improve, with that 5-on-5 expected goals for being, 48.3%. You'd like to see that number tilt towards 50, or even above 50 before you feel more confident that the Wings are going to carry play night in and night out. But definitely a really impressive 10 games.
Something that I think, definitely is solid and it's real, and not to diminish anything that the Red Wings have accomplished or attribute their success to luck. I'm not doing that at all. But something that's felt the most substantial to me is Dylan Larkin specifically. Like the way he's elevated his play. And yes, that's because he has Gostisbehere on the power play and DeBrincat to pass to on his top line. But it just seems like he, as an individual player, is still taking step after step after step, year over year. And you watch the game, you deploy the so-called eye test, and you see that. And then you actually said in our group chat the other day, by some numbers, he is among the best players in the league to start the season. Yeah,
when you look at Dom Luszczyszyn's game score model, that ultimately factors into his game score value added, or GSVA, that you see, Dylan Larkin, after I think through 8 games or 9 games, was the number 2 player in the NHL by average game score per game, which attempts to measure, who had the best game, because it factors in the box score stats. It factors in how the play was tilted at 5-on-5. And he's really been the engine for this Red Wings team. And I think that had to be the case. Prior to the season, I had a radio show out in Grand Rapids ask me, if you were going to be wrong, what was going to be the reason you were wrong? And what I ended up saying was Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat play at an elite level. And that's exactly what you've seen so far. And Dylan Larkin's that engine that's driving this team, both on the power play with his, ability to play in the slot, move the puck, retrieve those pucks that are loose, and then ultimately have those zone entries. And then at 5-on-5, he's making stuff happen out of nothing. He's been so good capitalizing on chances in transition. He creates opportunities with his speed, and he's not just staying wide. He's finding ways to attack the middle of the ice, finding ways to preserve possession. And then to round out his game, the guy's playing a lot on the penalty kill. He's doing absolutely everything for the Detroit Red Wings right now. He's in the prime of his career, and he's putting up what appears to be, the best statistical season he's ever had.
Let's talk about his new line mate, his friend, returning to his hometown team. I shouldn't say returning. He's, for the first time ever, playing for his hometown team. Alex DeBrincat, obviously an electric start at points, leading the league in goal scoring, still up there in scoring and points measures across the NHL. How has his presence changed the Red Wings offense fundamentally, and what are the numbers behind his impact for Detroit?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask anybody what's been the number one thing missing from the Red Wings over the last few years, it's been an elite finishing talent, someone who can just convert the chances. This is what everybody wanted Filip Zadina to be. This is what everybody wanted to see from Lucas Raymond, just this elite sniper that could, bury chances whenever they were given. That's Alex DeBrincat, and that's the value he brings. He's consistently, over the course of his career, finished chances at a higher rate than just about any other player. He's been in the top 3 or 4% over the course of his career, and that's been no different, thus far. He's obviously, got the 9 goals already, well on his way to a monster goal-scoring season, but it's sort of how he converts those chances. He's finishing his chances well above expected. A lot of people like to say, okay, here's what a player's expected goals should be, which is an attempt to measure the quality of chances that a player is getting, and then looking at their actual goals and saying whether or not it's sustainable. The fact of the matter is most of those expected goals models are based off of an average shooter. They're not factoring in the talent of the shooter taking those shots. And a guy that's been able to consistently convert at a rate higher than expected is DeBrincat, and he's doing that absolutely thus far. And I think that opens up a lot of space for Dylan Larkin to move. You have to shadow DeBrincat on the power play. You have to be aware of where he's at on the rush. It gives a defender an extra, element to think about, which in Dylan Larkin's mind, he just needs an extra step. And so you give him that, and it's allowed him to create a lot more opportunities for the both of them. And ultimately, DeBrincat has not disappointed in that space.
All right, I'd be remiss if I didn't jump to the defense and allow you to continue your very strong political campaign for Jake Walman and the Norris Trophy. So let's jump to defense, and let's start with Jake Walman. What are you seeing this season compared to his rise from last season?
I mean, we need to be, let's make sure everybody's on board the train here. This is the Jake Walman for Norris campaign. Jake Walman, when he came over in that trade, a lot of people were going, who is Jake Walman? Myself included. And then I had a very interesting conversation with Corey Schneider back in the day, and he goes, Walman's one of the most impressive players we've ever seen on the microstats side. The way he played in transition, the way he was able to deny chances against, his entry defense, all of these things, he was like, this is a guy who has the potential to shine. And so I'm shouting out Corey for that, because while everybody's wondering who Jake Walman was, Corey was like, I think this guy profiles as a guy who could be a stud. Last year was the first time Walman really got that chance. He had come back from the shoulder injury that knocked him out in his first season in Detroit. Got to move all the way up to playing with Moritz Seider starting in December. And then he was one of the best defensemen in the league as measured by expected goals above replacement, as measured by game score, whatever metric you wanted to utilize. He was an elite shot suppressor, and ultimately a guy that tilted play in his team's favor. Now, you have to then think, is that a flash in the pan? Was that a really good 4 months? And thus far this season, it is not just a really good 4 months. He has absolutely continued. And I think the most impressive part about Walman this year is it is far more noticeable to the eye. You are seeing him everywhere. He is disrupting plays on the rush. He is knocking down zone entries. He is preventing zone exits. His skating puts him, in great position to make all of these plays where he can skate the puck out of his zone. He can pass the puck out. He tends to make very smart plays. He has had a couple of boneheaded turnovers this year. But for the most part, he's played an absolutely phenomenal game. And that's why, you again go to pull up the metrics and you start to take a look at who are the top leaders in expected goals above replacement for a defenseman. There's Jake Walman in the top 10 once again. And so he's really profiling as a guy that could be that elite second, defenseman for Detroit next to Moritz Seider. And sort of, makes you wonder, if you've got these two elite guys, would you potentially benefit from splitting them up and seeing if you can spread the wealth the same way that Boston can roll out Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy for 50 minutes, or the same way that Pittsburgh can roll out Chris Letang and Erik Karlsson for 50 minutes. I'm wondering, to an extent, are you going to get an element of that if you were to have a Walman and Seider on the ice for, 83% of the game?
And just to skip past Seider for a second here, my brain is filling in the blanks. And are you saying, bring up Simon Edvinsson and see if you can't use one of those two talented guys to really help carry some of the weight in his transition to the NHL, and see if you can't bring him up to being a bona fide top four defenseman?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you were to, take Simon Edvinsson, he's a left shot. And so you potentially put him with Mo Seider, and you let Jake Walman, play with Gostisbehere, who's very comfortable playing on the right side, or you let him play, with another right shot defenseman, on Detroit, whether it's Justin Hall or Ben Sherratt. I think Walman has the potential to elevate any pairing he's on. I think you're seeing that he is a driver. He is not a passenger. He is an engine that can potentially carry another partner. And I do think it'd be a lot of fun to see a top four of Seider and Edvinsson, where you have two very dynamic, skilled, big defensemen that can move the puck with their feet, that can move it, via pass, and that have very good offensive IQs. And then you have a second pairing that follows up with Jake Walman and Shane Gostisbehere. Now you've got a really dynamic top four. And so to me, that's the natural end game for the Red Wings here. And that's an end game I would expect to see in the next couple of months, because you're basically finding that outside of those top four for Detroit right now, which the top four has really been, Seider, Walman, Sherratt, and Gostisbehere, no one has taken kind of a stranglehold of any of the remaining two defense spots. And so if you're going to continue to sit one of those guys in the box and, sit 2.3 million or 3 million in the box, or sorry, I should say in the press box every time, why not give a guy like Simon Edvinsson a shot to grab that job? Because if you do and he grabs that job and takes off, you've got a really dynamic top four.
So you're saying the 11 forward, 7 defense configuration is what you would like to see sometime soon? I
mean, at this point, if you're going to bring Edvinsson up, I think you could maybe start like that, but I'd like to see them eventually go 12-6, and you're going to have to jettison a couple of these guys because if no one's going to take a stranglehold on that spot, give Edvinsson a shot in an 11-7 role. Have somebody scratched, or potentially when the first injury happens on the back end that keeps somebody out for a while. Call him up, run 11-7, let him get his chance to grab the job, and if he grabs the job, then you have your decision made where you need to find a trade partner to get one of these guys out to create that space for Edvinsson.
Okay, and to jump back to Seider, it's really funny. The conversations around Seider right now are a little bit testy. I mean, I'm going to talk about this on the main show too, but I find that by no means is anyone saying Seider's doing bad. We saw the pass that he made to was it Compher, who was, yes. I think Sean posted a screenshot. When he made that pass, Compher was completely off screen. That's how unreal that look was from Seider. So he's still doing Mo Seider things. And I think offensively he is, completely up to speed. But we're seeing some indecisiveness on the defensive side of his game, which seems to coincide with the starts of seasons for Mo Seider. And I want to qualify all of this by saying he's still so young. And take any dominant defenseman. Look at Victor Hedman, look at Rasmus Dahlin, blah, blah, blah. Early on in their careers, they had stretches where people were questioning whether they were even ever going to be elite. Seider is well beyond that now. So to call out small things like this is not to disparage Mo Seider. But we're seeing some defensive indecisiveness, some positioning, some breakout decision kind of errors where we know he can do a lot more. And he has been and will be a lot better than that. But what would you attribute to the missteps so far from Seider, the small ones defensively?
Yeah, that's kind of a great way to lay it out. I think, most of the errors that you're seeing from Mo is just exactly what you said, indecisiveness and transition. And, part of me wonders if it's related to changes in system. Part of me wonders if there's been tweaks, with the different tweaks in the rosters, if there's a little bit of an adjustment there. He is playing with his same defense partner, so it isn't a change in defense partner like it was from the year prior, when he went from playing with Danny DeKeyser to playing with Ben Sherratt, and you have to get a little bit of an adjustment period there. Again, all of that being said, I think the reason the conversation has been sort of testy and people have these frustrations is because of what we saw as a rookie. What you know where his game can be. That's the thing. It's not like this is a guy that had a high pedigree that's never hit it, and you're just frustrated because you think he's potentially a bust. It's like you've seen this game from him before. You've seen it at the NHL level. You saw it as a rookie, and you're just wanting him to find that consistency to get back there. But I think we have to all remember there's been a lot of changes to the Red Wings coaching staff, to his defense partners, to the roster turnover, to the system, that there's going to be an adjustment period for a guy that is 22 years old. And so even though I've said that I haven't been as impressed with his play this year, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be impressed by Mo Seider. I absolutely think he figures this out. And whether it's just him finding the right decisions to pinch, the right times to attack, the right times to fall back, I think that's just what he's going to have to work out this year. And it's okay. You brought up Rasmus Dahlin. Last year was the first year we saw elite Rasmus Dahlin. And that took several years because Dahlin was a 2018 draft pick. And so, that took some time to get here. And Mo Seider is not going to be any different. He's going to be a guy that's going to find his way. He's going to have his ups and downs. He's still 22. But at the end of the day, we have seen that talent at the NHL level, and I think that's just what you want to see come back. And so it'll be just finding the consistency in transition. But overall, the skill is there. The IQ is there. The skating is there. All the tools are there. You just got to get it all put together, wrapped in a nice little package.
And for anyone who is vehemently disagreeing with this and saying, how are you talking about anything Mo Seider's doing wrong, trust when I say that everyone sees this and says, wow, Mo Seider having, not his best start and still doing what he's doing on the ice is a blessing to the Red Wings and a privilege the team hasn't had for quite some time during a rough rebuild. So,
yeah, I mean, when you haven't had your stars playing recently or playing to the highest of their potential, it's usually a recipe for disaster. But I think the saving grace to Mo's game is as we're getting through these 10 games, I'd say 2 of the last 4 games from Seider have been his best 2 games of the season. And arguably the 2 games, where he was the best defender for Detroit on the ice. So I think he's already starting to figure it out. I don't think this will be anything like last season where there's a couple of months where he was struggling to put it together before getting paired up with Walman. I think this is a very short, rough patch for him, if you will. And he's already on his way to figuring it out.
And then one last player I want to talk about here is, and that's just because of the lofty expectations, or I should say pressure that is on his shoulders coming into the season, is Lucas Raymond. A lot of people, myself included, said as Raymond goes, the Red Wings will go this season because of the increased need for offense and how can he elevate his game. So what would you make of Lucas Raymond's start? And I'm saying this, we're recording, and the last goal that was scored for the Red Wings was Lucas Raymond's OT winner. So, yeah.
That definitely a huge amount of pressure, and it's a contract year for Lucas Raymond. And this is a big year because, his play is going to dictate, are you bridging him or is he an 8-year fixture in Detroit? And there's already a lot of pressure coming in. And last season you saw that one of the common themes with Lucas Raymond was he would get knocked off the puck. He wasn't able to be physical enough to, maintain possession, to win pucks back. And that was the kind of stuff you saw in the SHL. He did so well. He was a relentless forechecker. He was always so strong on the puck, was always able to get it. But I think the physicality of the NHL and the size of some of these guys really challenged him a bit. And so I think this offseason, you saw him put in the work. He is stronger. He is winning board battles. He is right back to being that relentless forechecker. I don't have these numbers in front of me because these are not numbers that are publicly available. But if I had to guess which Red Wings player has won the puck back the most in the offensive zone, I would guess Lucas Raymond over any other player, because I think he has forced the most offensive zone turnovers of any Red Wings player here, where he's able to pick a defender's pocket, get the puck back, and then immediately get some meaningful possession going. And so he has been the perfect complement to Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat, because now you've got a guy that functions as the puck retriever in Lucas Raymond. He is getting the puck, but this is an elite puck retriever. He's winning pucks back. He's getting the puck with a good first pass up to the guy that can drive the line, being Dylan Larkin. And then you've got an elite sniper in Alex DeBrincat on the other side. And I think that's been the big reason this line's been so successful, is all three guys are contributing in their roles. And it's really important to make sure that we don't lose sight of Lucas Raymond's role in his ability to win these pucks back, maintain possession, and then get the puck up to those guys to actually go make plays. And so he's been absolutely tremendous this season.
Well, I think we could talk pretty much all day about the different Red Wings storylines. We didn't even do Shane Gostisbehere today, but
we can talk about Joe Veleno.
We didn't even talk about Joe. Actually, we should do Joe Veleno.
We got to talk about Joe Veleno, because this guy has been money. He's been absolutely money. He's another guy that was coming into a big year. It's a contract year. Came off of a rough summer that saw him, get tossed out of a tournament because of the stomping incident with his skate. And so he was another guy that really was in a show me year. And he's come out and been absolutely phenomenal. He is really the only consistent beacon of offense in the bottom six right now. We talked about the Red Wings' depth earlier. They've gotten goals from, a bunch of different guys, but the only guy that's really been contributing consistently in that bottom six has been Joe Veleno. And you can see it. He's winning over the coaches. They're getting him out there in late game situations. He's been better in every facet of the game. The way that he is shooting the puck, his shot looks a lot better. He's been exceptional in the face-off circle this year after previously struggling. He's been great in transition on defense. He's been great in every aspect of the game. Like, there's not a bad thing I can say about Joe Veleno's game. And the nice thing about it is you're seeing it play out in the stats. Whether you look at game score, whether you looked at expected goals above replacement, we'll use expected goals above replacement for the purposes of this conversation. He's number 2 on the Red Wings in expected goals above replacement, behind Alex DeBrincat. Like, that's incredible. Like, that's still ahead of Jake Walman, which I have to say is an amazing, amazing feat for any player. But
future Norris Trophy winner.
Right. But to have a bottom six player be able to be, your second best player in terms of total expected goals above replacement, not just per minute, but in total expected goals above replacement, this is a guy that's really giving you a lot. And so this is the next step you had to see from him. He's giving it to you. And I hope this continues, because if it does, now you've got a bona fide, 20 goal scorer that can potentially be in that bottom six, the same way that Ottawa was hoping to have that with Shane Pinto. That's what Joe Veleno can be.
And just for some simpleton stats here, Joe Veleno's goal totals in 2021-2022, 8 goals in 66 games. Last season, 9 goals in 81 games, so almost a full season. This season, through 10 games, he already has 5 goals. So
yeah, he's almost a third of the way to his career goal total.
Yeah, great start for Joe Veleno. And age isn't everything. Of course, you're going to have veteran players who are going to contribute, and you have to cycle those out. But if Detroit is able to find a mainstay in their bottom six who is an impact player, not every impact player can be in the top six. A mainstay who's 23 years old and has his best years ahead of him, that is a massive win for the rebuild.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, we've been talking about, how are the Red Wings going to be this playoff contender? And we have to talk about it in the context of, this is a team that's not getting draft luck. That's the way almost all of these rebuilds have gone. The successful ones have ultimately resulted in multiple top 3 picks. Well, that's never going to be Detroit. Detroit's not going to get that unless they win a lottery and are ranked 13th or better, where they're able to move up to 10 spots. So how do you actually do that? You have to have your picks outside of that hit, and you have to have guys that you weren't expecting to develop in a certain fashion develop into that. I don't think anybody was expecting Joe Veleno to give you this, at this point, in his career. He's a 2018 draft pick. It had been 5 years out. We were sort of thinking this is what it is. But no, all of a sudden he's turned his game around, and this is a bright spot that you can build around in that bottom six. And so you get a couple more of these bright spots that come out of nowhere, whether it's Carter Mazur, being a later round pick that's able to develop. It's Jonathan Berggren as a second round pick being able to continue his success and work his way back up. That's the kind of things you're going to need to have happen as a Red Wings fan if you want to see this team ultimately be that playoff contenders. You're going to have those things hit, and then you're going to have to supplement it with trades and through free agency, which is a non-traditional way to do this, but a way that can still be done.
Well, I think our next step is to see where the Red Wings are at about Thanksgiving, because that's the arbitrary benchmark that's used for will his team make the playoffs. And then we can see how much of this, really strong start is going to solidify and be a foundation for the team. But for now, let's wrap up the hockey talk and take just a minute here. Prashanth, something you and I work on a lot in the offseason, besides torturing Max in the group chat, is Wings Money on the Board in our efforts to raise money for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. We are looking to raise $50,000 this year for them. I think lifetime total contributions across Wings Money on the Board, Wing Wheel podcast nights, etc. Your very generous donations have surpassed $100,000. So talk to the audience a little bit about what Wings Money on the Board is and what we're looking to do.
Yeah, so Wings Money on the Board is a season-long initiative that basically aims to raise money for the Jamie Daniels Foundation, a foundation that works to combat substance use disorder in Southeast Michigan and really across the state now as they're doing more and more work. And so with Wings Money on the Board, you sign up through our Google form. If you have any trouble finding it, you can go to the Wing Wheel podcast site. It's available up there. And on that form, you can make a pledge. You can say, I would like to donate X amount of money for every Moritz Seider hit, or I would like to donate X amount of money for every Alex DeBrincat goal, or you can create your own pledge. We have a few that are common that people can choose from, or if you want to create your own, and some people get really, really creative with these, like, every time Ville Husso makes a save, plus every Moritz Seider hit, plus something along those lines, people will make a donation. And so get as creative as you want, but at the end of the day, our goal is to raise money here for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. And so sign up on Wings Money on the Board. We have a lot of prizes that we like to do throughout the year. We just did our first kind of big game of the season against Ottawa, where we were able to give away an Alex DeBrincat jersey, a Wing Wheel podcast quarter zip, and then 3 6-month subscriptions to Sean Shapiro's Shap Shots blog. That is a tongue twister to say. And so stay tuned for more of those throughout the year as we work our way towards 50,000.
All right, folks, this has been Prashanth Iyer, host of Expected by Whom. Follow him, follow the show, give the show a listen. The better content is there. Their interviews are phenomenal, blows what we do out of the water. So really, really love what they're doing. And Prashanth, as always, thanks for joining us, man.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to Prashanth for taking over while Evan convinced me that he was colorblind during the downtime as we spliced in that interview. But no, great conversation with Prashanth Iyer to talk all things Red Wings. As you can see, there's a lot to be optimistic about with this team and a lot to genuinely look forward to as we approach that, arbitrary but very real Thanksgiving cutoff to see if this Detroit team is actually a serious playoff contender. Let's jump over to the rest of the NHL. 3 different major news points with the Ottawa Senators. When it rains, it pours, then it hails, and then it tornadoes on your house, and then it floods, and then it wildfires, it seems. Ottawa cannot stop getting beat down by the hockey gods.
The weird thing is I'm not even sure I know the 3 you're talking about, because I'm not even convinced that it's only 3.
Yeah, it keeps piling on. So first and foremost, the rumors that were floating around recently, which seemed kind of wild, came to fruition. In July 2021, the Ottawa Senators traded Evgeny Dadonov to the Golden Knights. And then the Golden Knights, a year later, in March of 2022, thought they had traded Dadonov to the Ducks in a part of a bigger trade. But after that trade was announced, it was determined that Dadonov's trade protection rights weren't honored and the trade was nixed. Dadonov stayed with the Golden Knights. The whole saga has been told time and time again. It was this big, ugly thing. a lot of accusations were levied and thrown towards Vegas, and it did kind of creep back towards Ottawa, but everyone was saying, hey, Vegas really screwed up here, and they tried to trade a player who they weren't allowed to trade. And really, it was Dadonov's agent who saved the whole thing from going through when it shouldn't have. Now, fast forward another year. We're in 2023, November 2023, so a lot of time has passed. And it turns out, without getting into all the details, which would take probably another hour podcast, it turns out Dadonov had trade protection that required the submission of a trade list, and Ottawa did not communicate as such with Vegas when they traded him. So there are certain rules about if you submit a trade list by a certain recurring interval or a certain time, it carries over to the next team, et cetera, et cetera. All the specific parameters are dependent on the trade protection per the contract. But essentially, Ottawa did not communicate this with Vegas. Vegas was, completely ignorant to it through, I don't want to say no fault of their own, but kind of no fault of their own. And then they got in the mess with the supposed trade with the Ducks that fell through. Why is this happening all this time later, where Ottawa was found to be guilty? Well, Vegas has a reputation across the NHL of being really harsh with their players and ruthless and cutthroat, and they were pissed off that they were getting blamed for something that wasn't their fault this time. And I kind of respect that and don't blame them at all. They have nothing to gain from this except for reputational, advantage. But now the Ottawa Senators are forfeiting a first-round pick.
That's wild.
That is a massive, that for something 2 years ago.
I don't even know how they come to the determination of the penalty for such things.
I understand, and first of all, I'm of the same mind, or I'm of two different minds. I think it's harsh, but I think it's right, because you cannot mess around with operational, league constitutional stuff like this. It ruins the integrity of the league when you mess with stuff like this. Whether or not Ottawa did it maliciously or through negligence, you kind of have to treat it the same, because if you don't have your ducks in a row, look at the knock-on effects. How many teams and players and picks, whatever, were involved with this? You can't unscrew this. So you have to punish teams hard to make sure that they know that you cannot mess up this bad. Arizona got charged a first-round pick and more for working out players before the draft. And some people might say, oh, that's just, some dinners and some workouts. No. If you're getting that much of an advantage, or any advantage at all, that break the league's rules, you need to get such a harsh punishment that you never think about doing it again. That's the kind of penalty that actually makes a difference.
There needs to be an overhaul of how these clauses are submitted and tracked, because the fact that one GM can just misrepresent or not even be aware that one of their players has this in their contract, and the other team can receive a player under such pretenses, is a joke to me.
Well, you're right. And the good thing is that when this happened last year, the NHL did kind of say, okay, now is a time for a central registry of clauses and things like that. So that it's good. And this whole retroactive penalty is just them cleaning up this situation. So Ottawa has to forfeit, by the language, it says one of its first round picks in either 2024, 2025, or 2026. Essentially, they have 24 hours after each respective year's draft lottery, if they hadn't given it up the year prior, to decide whether they're giving up that year's first-round pick. So my understanding is that doesn't involve the other picks that they own, including Detroit's from the DeBrincat trade. They have to give up one of their picks. So they have 3 years to do this. So is it the harshest way to strip a first-round pick? No, but it's still a first-round pick.
Yeah, and again, I like your point about it has to be a deterrent. Because that's the whole point of levying punishments. I'd be remiss, and I know a million people pointed it out on Twitter, that the NHL's hands aren't clean in this, because, everybody's beat it to death, and I'm not going to go on a long tirade about it because everybody's thinking the same thing. It's a stiff punishment. It's understandable. Same with the Coyotes. It's stiff. It's understandable. And yet we're sitting here watching Connor Bedard on the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah.
10 years covering up a sexual abuse by a coach, and they don't even get a pick stripped. I know it's arbitrary and entirely different circumstances, but if you told me Arizona got a first stripped for what they did, Ottawa got a first stripped, I would have asked if Chicago would have a first-round pick in the next 5 years. And
what do they call it in college sports when they get basically stripped of all their recruiting rights? There's a very specific term for it.
I know what they refer to the infractions as are violations.
Yeah,
but
they basically call it like the death penalty or something in terms of like this team can't recruit for like the next X years, and it basically like cripples their program. Like that's sort of the level we're talking about. Chicago should have been penalized, and I know we've talked about this at length in a lot of episodes. So yes, how they come up with these decisions and these penalties, I would love to know. And I'm sure Michael Andlauer would as well.
Oh, man. Okay, listen. We know why. We don't know why, but you can't tell me it's a coincidence that two of the smallest markets in the NHL get the first-round pick and one of the biggest doesn't.
Hey,
that can't be a coincidence.
Hey, NHL owners have different size sticks to be whacking around.
That's what it is.
It's definitely something like that. And one is an original 6 team involved in this conversation.
Steve Dangle said something today, which I thought was poignant, and I'll repeat, which is that there's not really a punishment in light of, what happened in Chicago. There's not really a punishment that could have been, put forward that would have made anything feel okay, of course. But I don't see why, and we're not going to hang on this, but I don't see why the same principle that's being applied to Arizona and Ottawa can't also apply here, which is that even if it feels, disproportionately large, or because so much time has passed or whatever, you have to make it so that these organizations, the GM's office and all of the people who are paid, decent money to work on this stuff, have the fear of the hockey gods in them while they're working on this to make sure that they get it right. And it's not just, trades and clauses and things. It's treating your employees like people. So that's that. Now, I do agree actually with both of you. I think Chicago had a bigger stick and obviously way more influence and power in this league. Like, imagine this happened in Boston. I don't think anything would have happened to them because of how much control that Jeremy Jacobs and now his family have over the league. Arizona, nothing in terms of ownership power. Ottawa, same thing.
Not according to Michael Andlauer.
Well, Michael Andlauer was a fun, fiery breath of fresh air. But first, Pierre Dorion was let go by the team. That was the next announcement that came. There were rumors that Dorion's seat was hot. Pretty much anytime a new owner comes in, that's going to be the case. Michael Andlauer loves Steos, who he knows from his days with Hamilton in the OHL, and he brought him over from Ottawa and was just, in an exec position. And some people thought, well, if and when Pierre Dorion does go, is this going to be Steve Steos' job? Well, now he's the interim GM. There's a quote actually that was very funny. I think it was from Down Goes Brown. It says, the Steve Steos search for a new GM in Ottawa feels about as suspenseful as the Kyle Dubas search for a new GM in Pittsburgh. And that's the impression I get, that it's going in that direction. But yeah, Pierre Dorion was let go. The way Andlauer phrased it was a mutual parting of ways, but he also said, I told Pierre Dorion that this was avoidable and that the cost had to be no less than his job, and Pierre agreed. They fired him. And that is the end of hot Pierre summer, as it were. So Canadian markets never fail to entertain in terms of how batshit they are, and Pierre Dorion's the latest GM to kind of go by the wayside.
It's amazing when one of the more functional organizations in Canada early in the season seems to be Vancouver.
I need you guys to know how crazy that statement is.
That statement is something, because the entire province of Alberta is up in flames. Nobody understands why Winnipeg doesn't fully suck right now. Toronto doesn't have a bad record, and their fan base is melting down, and somehow the Montreal Canadiens are battling for first place in the Atlantic.
It's all backwards.
Nothing makes
really
sense.
Is.
Yeah.
And then there's Ottawa.
Well, DJ Smith is clearly in the crosshairs now. There's what I can gather is Ottawa. I don't think Ottawa will be giving up this year's first round pick.
Look, we've seen teams turn around from worse positions, and I don't think Ottawa's a bad team as they're composed.
No.
If Detroit can be performing this well, Ottawa can be performing this well by the players they have on the roster, plain and simple. But yeah, I agree with you. If DJ Smith, if they continue to slide, I do think they'll do the whole breath of fresh air coach switcheroo to try to salvage the season.
When you bring in a new GM, whether it be Steve Steos or whoever,
maybe you, the reader,
maybe even you,
yeah.
The clock is ticking on a coach at that point. Like, they always like to bring in their own guy and leave their own mark on and build the identity of the team. So I would imagine DJ Smith is now the new owner of the hot seat, but I guess time will tell.
Also, for all the jokes we make, I think Pierre Dorion has had a pretty, wild ride as a GM. I think he's made some downright terrible moves. I think he's made some unbelievably good moves that are sorely underrated. I think once, Eugene Melnyk passed away and Pierre Dorion no longer had Eugene Melnyk's thumb on the team, he was able to do a little bit more and make some more good moves. But plain and simple, you can't make this mistake and keep your job in the NHL. Like that is, you can't come back from that.
No.
I think he'll probably find work in the NHL again. He's pretty well respected, pretty well connected guys. You'll run into him in a hallway once in a while. That's well and good, but you can't cost your team a first-round pick. And think of the implications. Ottawa's competing with Buffalo, Detroit, soon to be Montreal, to take over the next era of Atlantic Division bona fide teams. A first-round pick is no joke. Their best bet is that they have an unbelievable season, and that pick is in like the 20s. And now they have to give up a first pick, and that's I tweeted this out, but it's a non-zero leg up for the teams around them. Does it make or break a rebuild? No. Like, is Tyler Boucher going to be anything for them? If not, and I hate to pick on the guy, I don't actually know whether he's going to be anything for them. But let's say you have a first round pick that's a waste, then that's no different than losing a first. But you have to at least take the shot. Losing a first round pick is unforgivable, and unfortunately, losing his job was what had to happen.
Michael Andlauer's got to be thrilled
because it gives him an excuse.
So you know that meme, that GIF that floats around the internet from Community, where Donald Glover walks into the room holding pizza boxes and everything's on fire? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Michael Andlauer and the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
Except the NHL told him everything was okay and there wasn't actually a fire.
Yeah, immediately before he paid money to open that door.
Yeah, so that's the third big story.
He actually bought this team off Kijiji, so it's buyer beware.
Hey, in today's market, you cannot ask for an inspection before you go in. You just have to buy it blind.
Yep, no restrictions on that offer.
Yeah, that's the third news story, which is Michael Andlauer had a press conference wherein he said the NHL did not advise him of either investigation relating to the Dadonov forfeited pick or the Shane Pinto investigation, both of which notoriously were surprises. He also said, he's taken some shots here. He said, you look at a young man like Shane Pinto who's making millions of dollars and representing the community, but he's 21 years old. Wayne Gretzky goes on MGM and talks about betting. Think about being injured, having time on your hands, and a cell phone. I understand the point he's making here. I don't know if it was the most well-advised
If it was
point.
Good radio, I would give the slowest clap right now, like what's that? Remember the whiskey commercial where the guys start clapping? That's me right now because he is clearly pissed off.
Yeah. So I'm gonna when you go through his points, a couple of the ones he made were bad and dumb. His overall vibe is on point, and I respect it deeply. This is one of the comments he made that's stupid, though, because he's objectively right and saying what we're all thinking, but he's one of the 32 guys pocketing all the betting money.
Well, yeah, that's why you could say it.
Here's what's happening. I think Michael Andlauer is making this noise because this is where he can earn back any kind of value in the battlefield. He is not going to sue the NHL. He is a new owner that would be, you know how the ownership group works in the NHL, and if you don't, it is incredibly insular. They will keep people out who have billions and billions and billions of dollars to inject in the league just because they don't like them.
See Jim Basile.
Yeah, it is incredibly hard to break in. He is not going to poison his ownership in the league and basically be pushed to the corner of every discussion in the room I don't want to say just because of this, but because of this. He's not going to light the room on fire. But if what he does do is make a stink about how unfair this is, he's going to get maybe a little bit of lighter, more favorable treatment in the future. Don't forget, Michael Andlauer was the NHL's golden boy in the Ottawa sales situation. They had this entire farce of celebrities and, conglomerates of people who had nothing to do with hockey and this entire public messy affair. Michael Andlauer, minority owner of Montreal Canadiens, embedded in hockey, well known to the NHL, was one of their guys, so to speak. They're going to want to make this right for him. I'm impressed that they were able to actually levy the kind of, punishment that they needed to as a deterrent, as Brad said, to one of their own. They're going to want to make this right for him. He makes a stink in public. he makes it known that he's upset about this. It riles up the fan base. It galvanizes support for the Senators, and it makes sure down the road the NHL knows that they're going to have to, tilt something in his favor in some way. What that is, I don't know, but basically the he's making it so the NHL now owes him one.
It's political theater.
Yes.
Yeah, he knows how dejected his fan base is right now.
Mm-hmm.
They are off to a slow start. They've had every controversy in the world in the last couple months. He's looking at future dollars right now. Every fan that checks out is money out of his pocket, and he's kind of taking this us against the world approach right now, which, again, even though some of his individual statements themselves, like I just mentioned the last one, are kind of dumb, he doesn't care about what he's actually saying because he just wants his fan base to hop on board and go, they're screwing us. It's us against the world. We're going to rally. And it's, from a business standpoint, kind of genius.
He said a lot of we as well in terms of, how sometimes fans say we. So I think fans are going to resonate a lot in the messages that he was trying to get across and sharing that sentiment. So I absolutely loved the press conference that was held today.
Oh, great entertainment. And I mean, you're going to have a hard time getting anything positive out of a Sens fan right now, but you're both right. Like, it is going to absolutely rally support. And it's different from what the Sens are used to. They're used to basically their ownership telling them that they're losing because of the fans or whatever stupid thing that Eugene Melnyk said that day. So it's hard to come out of that situation losing a first-round pick with any positives, and Andlauer worked hard to make sure that they got what they could. Now, he did say things like, maybe they didn't want to disrupt the sale to make sure the seller got the best price possible, which is a big statement to say to the league.
That is a shot across the bow. That is him saying, I know what you did here. You screwed me.
And then he also said, I knew about it, the due diligence process, and basically from the seller's perspective, it was really a non-issue. So I talked to someone who's familiar with big deals like this, not in the sports world, but, in the banking corporate world. And with acquisitions this large, there's a due diligence process, and basically in contracts, there's often clauses and whole stacks of documents that say, you did your own due diligence, sign here, you're satisfied with what you're seeing, you sign here, you release all blah, 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 to pursue any kind of legal blah, 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 sign here. Does that stop a future lawsuit? No. It boils down to, who has more political power in that situation, which lawyers are better, things like that. But what Andlauer referred to, the due diligence process, he would have known components of this, the Dadonov situation specifically, maybe not the Pinto one, as it were, with how that unfolded, but with the Dadonov one, he knew and was basically got the impression that it was a non-issue. And he's right to be pissed, but that's going to be such a legal battlefield that I'd be shocked if he actually moved down that road, which is why I think the best he could do within reason is that shot across the bow.
Yeah, 100%. It's all I can do, because he's not going to sue the NHL as he becomes the new owner and then, he's the pariah of all the meetings for the next 20 years. That's not going to go in his favor either.
When he said something like, why am I inheriting this all this time later? You see his point. I would say the exact same thing if I was in his position, if I, was a billionaire like Evan. But, I mean, he knows the answer to this, but this is what you bought, Michael.
You own the thing. You are responsible for the thing.
Have you not paid attention to the Ottawa Senators for the past 5 to 10 years?
My good friend, you were a minority owner of the Montreal Canadiens. Surely you know the circus that comes with Canadian hockey markets.
Exactly.
And the Canadians, by all rights, are like the Yankees compared to how the Sens are run. That's this foundation that's been running for a century.
I think there was another sentence or statement he had. I don't know. I can't remember what the phrasing of the question was, but it's basically what are you looking forward to? And he's like, less calls from the NHL. Oh my God.
Yeah. It was a combination of a guy who's pissed off, knows he's screwed, even though he paid top dollar for this team that needs a lot of rehabilitation. Let's call a spade here. Pierre Dorion was going to go no matter what eventually, and he perceives a lot of Eugene Melnyk's DNA in this team that needs to be cleaned out. So he knows he's going to have to put money into it. He knows he has to put effort into it. He sees a slow start to the season.
Probably would have preferred an expansion team at this point. He was close enough.
It's political theater. Yeah, it was calculated, yet smart for the fan base and to get, future political points to the NHL. I'm sure they're not happy with him now, but blah, blah, blah. But also, he's just pissed. He's just pissed.
People fans love to see that stuff. They love to see the owners on their side and understanding how they're feeling. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, obviously Detroit hasn't had any big controversies like this in a while, but even think back to, what was it, the Seattle game, the stick throw. If Chris Illich hopped on a mic after and went, what are they doing to it? We've been irrelevant for 7 years. All of a sudden we're good, and now they're allowing this crap to happen. We would have been sitting here standing and clapping from that press conference.
Just one tweet. That's all we need.
Yeah. I mean, I hesitate to ask for really engaged owners because it's almost universally a bad sign in hockey.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Anyhow, thank you, Senators, for the entertainment. Okay, one more piece of NHL news before we get into overtime. Nicklas Backstrom of the Washington Capitals, obviously returning from hip resurfacing surgery. Doing that to your body is incredibly difficult, period. But as an athlete, it's kind of unheard of to come back and play at the level that we're used to him playing at. You know, one of the most prolific playmakers of his time. And it was announced today that he is stepping away from the game as he, evaluates his options and focuses on his health. You don't want to call anything until it's done, but this does look like he's trending towards LTI retirement, medically being unable to continue based on, how the recovery process has gone. Unfortunate. I think a lot of people might not appreciate what Backstrom was, especially if you're a newer fan. He really was just unbelievably good. Ovi doesn't get to the goal total he has now without Backstrom, but it sucks to see a mainstay step away like that.
Feels so bad for him too, right? Like, the game's still there, and he wants to keep playing, but your body just kind of says no. Like, that's got to be one of the worst feelings. Like, the passion's still there, the compete's still there. You just can't do it at the NHL level. I really do feel for him because he was one of the premier playmakers in his prime.
One of the side effects of this that might screw over another player? How many millions of dollars off Patrick Kane's next contract now?
That's what I just brought up, like why I brought it up. Like, Patrick Kane also had hip resurfacing surgery, was out for a long time. And, even if you think Patrick Kane was a better player than Backstrom at his peak, which I think he was, how's he going to come back from this?
Yeah, everybody just watched Nicklas Backstrom attempt to come back from it and fail 1 month into the season. How many people are going to have supreme confidence that if they sign Patrick Kane to a 1 or 2 year contract that he's going to make it through it and be effective throughout it?
I'd imagine that contract is Patrick Kane obviously wants probably as long as he can or as much money as he can. I would imagine teams would are becoming more hesitant for long-term deals there. And by long-term, I mean more than 1 year.
That's fair to me. Like, I understand those differences in the players and how their age curves have gone and things like that, but there's a reason why this hasn't happened a lot and had it be successful in terms of a player coming back and playing at their top level. So, of course, there's going to be a team that's still going to want to take the risk, but don't be fooled. Teams are going to see this, take notice, and bring that to the negotiating table. I think Patrick Kane's probably going to have to make a decision on where he wants to win more than anything, because I'm not sure how much is going to be out there for him in terms of total dollars over multiple years.
Yeah, he's going to have to take, I feel, in all likelihood, a short-term, low-dollar deal with a heavy bonus structure if he can hold up.
I always thought with Patrick Kane sort of waiting to see how the season plays out that his ultimate goal for being back in the NHL is to win again. So the good teams are almost always right up on the cap. He's going to have to take, like what you said, Brad, a low dollar deal with high bonus, because I just don't know where the money comes from otherwise, unless, there's LTIRs and trades for dollars out. Like, I just don't see how that's possible otherwise.
Anyhow, all the best to Nick Backstrom. Unfortunate. Washington, man, talk about a team who's expected to be bad, is bad, season getting worse. Like, that's going to be a rough ride for them this year. They're not quite at the bottom. They still have pulled out after a bad start. They're 4-3-1 now, so 9 points, but it's not trending in the right direction for them overall.
Bad vibes. There's bad vibes, too.
Yeah. Anyhow. Okay, let's jump into overtime here on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Overtime, again, is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. The Discord, the season ticket giveaway, and bonus content, not just bonus overtime episodes, but extra bonus episodes that we posted. Actually just threw one up last night of these two guys doing their preseason predictions. All of that and lots more. It allows us to do things like run the show, host Winged Wheel podcast nights at the LCA, and support the Jamie Daniels Foundation, produce Expected by Whom, hosted by Sean Shapiro and Prashanth Iyer, all that and lots more. So many thanks to our members of the Dub Club, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. Question from Curtiplas says, given how different a team can look from period to period, I'm curious what the teams and players actually do during the 20-minute intermission. I know that on some level there's a discussion /speech/coach/process, but for instance, are players watching tape as a team from that game that the assistant coaches are picking out during play? Is it more of a small group type breakout between various players? Is there typically some kind of a soft psych up by the team leadership? I know something game-changing can occur in that locker room, but it'd be nice to get some insight to what's actually happening.
It's shockingly little compared to what you might think. A typical intermission will usually be a 2 to 5 minute coach's speech, varying levels of anger, depending on how the game's going, just tweaking systems, emphasizing points, pregame points, what they're trying to do, maybe making some adjustments on the fly. Some guys might be going to get worked on if they're nursing injuries. They'll go lay on the table. Trainer stretches them out for a couple minutes. Most part, guys are just sitting in their stall, kind of recouping, resting, getting some energy back, maybe grabbing a small snack, drink. Guys might retape their stick. Just simple stuff like that. There's not a lot that goes on there during intermission.
A lot of guys get 50% undressed too.
Yeah, which to me is psychotic behavior.
Why?
Oh, it takes you 2 seconds to get your top.
Well, you gotta untuck your shirt from your jersey from your pants. what other ungodly equipment you wear?
Just the left side tuck. I only did the left side tuck.
You shoot right, so you didn't even tuck in the right side. God. Anyways,
look, it wasn't rash. No jersey tuck is rational.
That is true.
Okay, you actually want to know why I started tucking jerseys? Because I was a very small kid, and jerseys when you were growing up, they didn't have every size.
Oh, yeah, that was every kid.
Yeah, and I just stuck with it.
They gave you the goalie jersey.
Yeah, well,
oh, sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, coaches were irritated that he kept picking number 1. But
yeah.
No, why wasn't 99 available? No. Another thing is, Brad alluded to this, you'd be surprised how little coaches are actually engaged once the game starts. A lot of them have a mentality of, let the guys run that room. Whenever there's a big speech to motivate the guys, I would say most of the time it comes from the players. The captain does a lot of legwork in that front.
And a lot of times the coaches will be within earshot of what's going on in the room. So, if the Red Wings have a real bad start to the first 2 periods and then second intermission, Larkin goes in there and tears a strip off the team, the coach usually won't come in guns a-blazing at that point because it's already happened and he can see his team's at least mentally engaged, even if they're not performing on the ice. Sometimes it doesn't matter what's happening. If it's going bad enough, the coach is coming in there and blowing out his vocal cords. But on a normal, and I stress normal intermission, it's just quick once over about whatever the coach wants to talk about, adjustments he wants to make, reaffirm some strategies. Guys get stretched out, but for the most part, they're just relaxing, recouping energy, getting ready for the next period.
Sandy Pelican says, I know Reimer is 2-1 and has good numbers, but, and maybe it's just me, he looks like he's swimming out there, right? Yeah, I actually said very much the same thing to someone. He's not been bad, but I feel like it's been a lot of luck and a lot of the team jumping in to bail him out at times. He's been decent, but he has been, kind of all over the crease some games.
I am not a goalie expert whatsoever, which is why I always hesitate to throw in strong opinions on goaltending. Reimer's footwork is bad in the crease.
Mm-hmm.
His I don't know what to call it, cadence of shuffling, his positioning with his feet. It all looks weird and awkward. I don't know how to describe it, but something is off.
And then they say, do you guys think we see Lyon soon, or does someone need to get hurt first? I think, and Ken mentioned this on the air on Bally Sports, I think what the team is angling for right now is keeping Lyon out long enough for the conditioning stint, which you can't keep pulling, but you can do it once, and the NHL will allow it to happen. They're getting near having to make a decision. we'll see what they do. I would love to see Lyon in, but I think it might be a little while yet. Okay, we are going to keep going here. Question from Reed Matthew says, is it concerning that the Wings have taken a lot of minor penalties, 44, which is fourth worst in the league, and are top 10 in penalty minutes, 103 minutes?
It's not great, especially considering how many of them have come late.
Yeah, it's late, and how many of them are avoidable. You play hard, you get a penalty, that's one thing or another. You have to take a penalty to defend a young star on your team or whatever it is, that's one thing. But the stuff like Perron, I think Rasmussen's taken some tough penalties this year.
Rasmussen had a real dumb one against Boston.
Doesn't Larkin lead the team in penalty minutes?
He usually does.
Okay.
Yeah, he's usually the first one to punch someone in the face in a scrum, though, so that's where most of his come from.
Jack's dad says, hey, friends, looking forward to seeing you grouchy old men on Saturday. How smart is it to utilize Larkin on the PK? I understand why he's on it, but given how important he is to the team and how much of a catalyst he is to the top line, would it not be in the team's best interest to use Zarnik or Veleno instead? I think either of them can provide similar utility on the PK, allowing Larkin to save his energy for 5-on-5 and power play time and reduce the risk of injury from blocking shots a la Bertuzzi, Rasmussen, Zadina, Kasper, etc.
This one's a tricky one because if you're a team like Tampa or Toronto where you have a lot of really good options and you can throw out anyone you want on the PK and you're pretty sure you're still going to get in the playoffs, you can do that. The drop-off from Larkin to some of their tertiary PKers is significant, and the Red Wings are by no means comfortable to make a playoff spot, so they have to pull off all the stops. Larkin's probably their best penalty killer, one of the best 2 or 3 at least. So if you want to make the playoffs, Larkin's energy be damned. It's irrelevant if you don't make it, so you do what you have to do to give yourself the best chance of making the playoffs and just pray it works out.
Yeah, I think you're right. Ideally, you do want to preserve them, but you don't really have the luxury a lot of times. Okay, folks, we're going to wrap this up because we have some housekeeping notes, and then we're going to record our bonus overtime episode. Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA Saturday, November 4th. For the after event, we are going to be going back to Harry's Detroit, so make it out there. Shoot us a message if you have any other questions. DM us on Twitter or shoot us an email, and we'll try to answer as many as we can before the event. But it's going to be at Budweiser Beer Garden. You'll get an email from the Red Wings explaining all the details, but the Beer Garden doors are going to open at about 4. We're going to do the live recording at 4:30. Ken and Chris are going to be there, and we're going to have some time, obviously, for meet and greet and things like that. You'll also be able to catch us in the concourse at the arena. Come to the concourse table. We have some special edition merch to give out there. That's separate from the beanies. We're actually very excited to hand those out. So we're excited to see you all on Saturday. Thank you all so much for tuning in. To all of our listeners, new and old, we appreciate you. If you want to support us and don't want to do it on Patreon, leave a rating wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is. Leaving those ratings really helps. And then hit subscribe. Tell a friend about the show. To all of our name level supporters on Patreon, this show, it only happens because of you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Raymond's Missing Tooth, Brad's Lord and Savior Bradley Cleveland, Icon, Glenn Brabham, Croner's Left Knee, Ashley Van Conant, Sea Lion, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Brad the Booger, haha, Brian J. Bauer, Carl Britannia Analuski, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Coyote Season Tickets and Anywhere But Tempe, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, D-Town West Side, Exquisitine Buble Schwinslow, Give Blood Fight Probert, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kaylin Wood, Marcus, Marlon Winchester, Matt K. Cannon Fodder to the Cheesebag Army, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Never Go Full Kyle, R.A., Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Ryan Vargas, Scott Martin, Scree and Lube, That's What I Appreciates About You, Walman's Elite Dancing D, Brian Vasha, Yzerman Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, Adam Rose, Andrew Broderick, Axels Sandy Pelika, Big Cheese, Brad Simmons, Chuck Buffchest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leightonen, Connor, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, D-Boss Snip Show, Dungeon Master of Puppets, Frank Stanley, Ferk Houston, NHL of Portland Baby, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, Healthy Scratch in the No Show, James Laporte, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans Derogatory, John Engels, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Nora Seider, Ophelia, Stephen the Hodag, the Mexinadian, the Hat123, Winging It in San Diego, X, formerly AA Ron, and your second favorite patron. Folks, we'll see you on Saturday at Winged Wheel Podcast Night, the LCA.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.